And I said this thing, and I'm like, I'm like, what are you looking at? Go get your own TV. Something really mean, right? It was like, and in Chinese, and it was so out of character. It was like what I was just copying how the adults were being. And there was this little tiny voice. It was a voice, and it completely was inside my chest, and it was warm. It was angelic, I guess. It was warm because it was so familiar, and I felt love. And it goes, why did you do that? It was like talking to me, and I go, I don't know. And I was having this conversation, and I'm this little baby. And then she goes, don't forget who you are. And I start crying. I was like, I forgot. I already forgot who I was. I already forgot. And she goes, go and apologize to him. And I go, okay. And I went and I told little boy, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I said that to you. Please come and watch TV anytime you want. That wasn't me. I was trying to, there was a distinct difference between who I was, right? Like who I was born to be, and then the different ways that I started to not be that.
This is Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, with Whitney Ann Jenkins. Hello and welcome to the 9th episode of Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, where I bring on guests and we talk about their inner authentic voice and the challenges and the rewards that come from following it. On this week's episode, I have with me Pien, who is an actress and a filmmaker based in Los Angeles. She is starring as a series regular on the new Jason Katims Amazon series On the Spectrum, and she plays a woman who is living on the spectrum, in the autism spectrum, and Sue-Ann herself actually is on the autism spectrum, and so she's very open about sharing that and her perspectives of what it was like for her growing up with autism, and her perspectives of that and how she's even now currently navigating her life with autism and within the entertainment industry. And she has a couple of other projects that coming up that she's not allowed to talk about yet. But she's also one of the Mars One finalists. So she's super passionate about space and especially Mars. And she is a karaoke fiend. And I know this firsthand because I have been karaokeing with Sue-Ann Pien. And it is an intense and super fabulous, fun experience. I'll just say that. If you listened to last week's episode, then you know that Cynthia Catania is Sue-Ann's partner in business, but also in life. They're married. And so it might be fun to listen to these two episodes back to back to see the fascinating qualities that both of these individuals bring individually. And so then you can imagine what they bring together. And I can speak from experience because, as I mentioned in the previous episode, Cynthia and Sue-Ann were my housemates for a while. And so I got a peek into their lives behind the curtains a little bit, including Sue-Ann's newfound passion for cooking. So I'm really excited for you to meet Sue-Ann Pien.
Hello. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm dressed like a big orange clown.
I like it. It suits you.
Thank you. I like your headphones.
Oh, thank you.
We are up in Big Bear right now.
Oh.
So we just spent the day in the snow, and we're gonna hike around and just explore.
That's exciting.
How are you? How have you been? It's been so long.
I've been good. I'm, chugging along. Yeah.
Right? Oh, it's
Expansion,
so cool. Yeah,
you probably are too, I imagine.
I mean, it's been a challenge to be creative in this down period of the coronavirus, and so everything is even getting away for a trip. I'm used to going to Disneyland every week, and it's just my normal routine has been disrupted. So it just looked kind of fun to do something, there's snow. I'm sure you're someplace where there's snow, right? We rented a truck.
There is snow.
We have a tiny cabin.
That's so cute.
Yeah, isn't it cute? It's so cute. It's a little tiny cabin, and it had a gas stove and and a little hot tub.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was perfect. It was very Scandinavian. It reminded me of when I went to Norway. And, all the Scandinavian people would go out into the mountains for winter time, and how fun that was. So
Yeah.
I should show you town. It's like, and then the town's like right here. There's like Christmas lights still. I was like, this is amazing. It's like I've had to find different ways to just,
Yeah.
I don't know, clear my head, get fresh air.
Yeah, so the pandemic, do you feel that do you feel like your creativity is kind of stifled, or are you finding new ways to access it?
Well, you saw one of the newer ways that we started doing that was like cooking,
Right.
right? I was like, oh my goodness, look at me cook. It was just such a yeah. So, surprisingly, like we've been doing fun things actually, Cynthia and I, because production's on hold, so I don't shoot for a little bit, but I'm, like the different ways to be kind of busy. Cynthia and I are making music videos for her songs, and we have another one coming up, and it's just finding ways to do it safely. We have, where you don't have to include like a huge production team
Mm-hmm.
or something. So that's really exciting.
Yeah.
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 Awesomes. Yeah. You let me know
Yeah,
what you need.
so one of the first things that I like to ask people is, when is the first moment that you remember realizing that you had your own individual thoughts and your voice of your own that wasn't influenced by the environment around you or what people were telling you, but it was like completely your own unique.
Oh, I think I was like born with
Mhm.
it. Yeah. Yeah. I think I was I remember being like, I was one of those. I wrote this about a lot of like kids on the spectrum, is that we have these phenomenal elephant memories, and I'm no different. Like I could remember being in the crib and watching my mom and dad play together, and I was in the crib watching them, and I remember what they did with their hands. And I remember when I got old enough to like speak to my mom and tell her about it, she was like, "Oh my God," like blown away,
Mhm.
blown away that I actually and I remember looking at, they had this little like, the little like things they put in top of the baby cribs that spins and has color and makes noises. I had one of those with like, little blue, red, yellow
Mhm.
colors. I remember that. I remember I was in the crib looking at that thing. And here's the crazy part. This is like before I could speak. I was like, I was like in the bed with my mom and dad. Sometimes they'd like put me in there to sleep with them. And I'm literally like probably, I don't know how old I am. I can't talk. I can't move,
Mhm.
right? Because I'm like a lump of a baby. And there was this spider, and it was like up in the corner, and this spider would like crawl down at night and bite me, and I would cry, and my parents couldn't figure out why I was crying. And I remember being frustrated that I couldn't talk or communicate to them that there is a spider, he bit me. And so these are my earliest, like I even have weird memories going back to before. Like I think it was like, remember, this is really weird. This is like my mom was in a hospital, and I was like following her as she was like getting rolled in. I probably wasn't being born. Like she was about to
Mm.
give birth to me, and I remember like walking through like one of the walls and the doors. Like I didn't need to like, like the nurse was like opening door for herself, and I would like walk right through the door with her. I have that memory. How crazy is that? That's wild,
Wow.
right?
So you were watching the whole process of.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I like and even, I was a strange, odd little one. Just because I knew the way that I was experiencing the world. I remember even like being on a swing. I don't think I talked much actually. And nobody really noticed, because partly I was like, I was raised in Taiwan from the time I was like 3 years old on, and so it was like they just thought maybe I just didn't know the
Mhm.
language. And then when I did start speaking, I was hyperlexic, so I could read like super fast, and like I got like the principal award for like, most improved student of the year. But yeah, there was this I remember this little kid. I was swinging next to him, and I was like sitting there looking at him, and I was probably like 2 years old or so. And I remember thinking, I wonder if he thinks thoughts in his head, because I was thinking thoughts in my head. And then I was thinking like I was just I just like was
Mhm.
curious about like what his like what that little, he was like so different from
Yeah.
me. And I remember having those thoughts from a very young age, like 2 years old, 3 years old, being very aware of myself, being aware when my body didn't work the way I wanted to, and how frustrating that was, because I was very clumsy, and I think that's typical of
Mhm.
kids. with Asperger's, they don't call that anymore. It's just all autism spectrum disorder. But I remember being like, 3 years old, 4, and I just couldn't, like, I would like take a few steps and take a tumble, and I was so mad because the body just it wasn't working the way I wanted it.
It wasn't cooperating with you.
Yeah. It wasn't cooperating with me. And my brain was like very different. I was very aware, and I always felt very, I was a little being. I am very aware of myself as a separate being.
And so do you remember the difference in environment and energy when you left Taiwan to come to the US?
Oh yeah. I mean, that whole period was very strange. I mean, I always felt very like I distinctly remembered. I have these memories where I didn't play with kids. I played on the outskirts, and from a young age, so I would like walk around from group to group, and then I remember like like I was young enough that like I would still like pee my pants every once in a while, and I had this. It's so bad. I shouldn't even say this, but I remember being in the back seat, and I knew better. I knew I wasn't supposed to like just pee. I was supposed to like tell my mom. But it was after like a long day. They were at their friends' houses, and I was just like toddling around. I would toddle from group to group, and it was strange because I would make sure they were all right first. I had this weird thing. I don't know what it was. And if I thought that group of kids were all right, then I would get up and move to another group of kids and then make sure they were okay. But I didn't have any interaction with them. So I would just like sit there with them. And it was strange. And so I remember being in the back seat and I was like, I have to pee. And I'm probably like 2 or 3 years old. and then I was like, I'll just pee right here. And I just I like made a very conscious choice to like just
you know what pants, I definitely I had a similar experience I think in preschool, and I was too scared to ask the teacher if I could go to the bathroom, so I was just like I might as well just pee. Yeah, I can relate to that.
It's so funny. Yeah. Yeah, isn't it great? Like, it's not much difference when you're older too, because you're like, oh, I shouldn't do this. I'm just, you know what I mean? You're just like, I'll just have that bag of chips. Yeah, it's so. I don't know. That probably wasn't the question you asked. You asked. Let me answer the question you did ask. Oh, the difference, right? Yeah, Taiwan was very strange. It was very different, but it was interesting because I think I was always like hyper observant and aware as a kid, so I just was able to like take everything in, and then it was a very different experience to be with my dad's family, and then to come back and have my mom raise me, because they were just, one, very different personality types, and then two, it was very different to like adjust to like how different my mom was with me than my dad's family. And like I was raised by help for a little bit out there too, and that was a very different experience, to be raised by people that didn't really own you, so to speak. Yeah, I think when you're young, you're just kind of like an open book, and you just like absorb and take in life. It's like all of this just becomes life.
Yeah,
life memories. I have incredible memories though. Like they're like so vivid. I can recall so much strangeness and interesting little like details.
Yeah, when did you realize that your voice was much different than everyone else's around you?
Oh yes, from a very young age. This thing happened, right? I was in Taiwan, and at this time I was being raised by like the family help. And so I was living, and we just got like a color TV. I don't remember if my aunt bought them a color TV or something, right? And it was kind of a big deal because this was like in the boondocks of Taiwan, out in the countryside, where I think, a lot of people were poorer. They just weren't, they didn't have a lot of means. And I remember, it was this like concrete hut. It was a strange place. It had like bars on it. And the neighbor boy, he would come to the window and look through that little window with the concrete bar into our little home to try to watch our color TV. And I was a little kid. And, I was like probably 3 years old or so, and 3 or 4. And I walk over to him one day, and I'm just like mean. And I don't know why. And it wasn't me. it was like maybe the people I was around, what I was witnessing, because that was the other thing. I grew up, also with a lot of privilege, and so I noticed the differences between how people treated people with wealth and not wealth and power. And I said this thing, and I'm like 3 or 4. I'm like, what are you looking at? Go get your own TV. Something really mean, right? It was like, and in Chinese, and it was so out of character. It was like what I was just copying how the adults were being. And then, in me, there was this little tiny voice. It was a voice, and it completely was inside my chest, and it was warm. It was angelic, I guess. It was warm because it was so familiar, and I felt love. And it goes, why did you do that? It was like talking to me, and I go, I don't know. And I was having this conversation, and I'm this little baby, and then she goes, don't forget who you are. And she goes, and I start crying. I was like, I already forgot who I was. I already forgot. And she goes, go and apologize to him. And that's the little voice in my in my chest. And I go, okay. And I went and I told the little boy, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I said that to you. Please come and watch TV anytime you want. That wasn't me. I was trying to, like, there was a distinct difference between who I was, right? Like who I was born to be, and then the different ways that I started to not be that.
You were absorbing your environment and yeah, maybe in
Yeah,
a super
yeah.
empathetic way.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that was a very noticeable, like, ooh. That was a different experience of life than other people's
Yeah, did that
experiences.
voice that you heard follow you through your life?
Yeah, I think we all reach a certain point, right? Like as kids, like it becomes like lonelier. I definitely experienced a lot of like hardship early on in my life, and throughout my teenage years. And I think there was a point where I was checked out and unable to really, it was just too much. Life got too much for me to handle. And I feel like sometimes maybe those voices, it came in the form of like a kind person that I didn't
Yeah.
expect, right? Like we have like these people in our lives that there's no other way to call them except that they're angelic. They were like, they do something that was like, or they're given a message that's just so poignant and much needed in
It's
those
like divine
moments.
timing. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Or a book or something I'll
Yeah.
read, or I remember, yeah, my dad giving me my first, like, he was always very spiritual and strange, even though he was an engineer, right? An aerospace engineer. He's very scientific, and his mind worked that way. But he gave me my first like Emmanuel's books that were so beautiful. They just brought me so much hope in a time where I was atheist. Like, he took me to go see like the Dalai
Oh
Lama,
wow.
and I was like, what is this? He's speaking Tibetan. I don't understand him. Yeah, but my dad was really into that, actually. Just strange now that I think about it. For somebody who is like an aerospace engineer, he had such an interest in, maybe because he had to, maybe because he lost some family members, and changed his ideas about spiritual life and all that. But he gave me my first books. Emmanuel's book is one of my favorites. And yeah, so he was someone who really like put me on a path of spiritual like discovery, and I didn't know it at the time because I was like such an angry little teenager. But he gave me my first Conversation with God books with Neil Donald Walsh, and that was life changing after my near death experience. It was the closest thing I could find and read that related to this idea of unconditional love that I actually experienced. And I was an atheist. I had no idea that after death there was so much more reality. Like, it was, I don't even have the words to talk about that. And so I didn't even know people had near death experiences. And when I began to kind of dive in, I started to read in the New Age sections about like authors like Raymond Moody, Life After Life. Even Dr. Brian Weiss, he writes about hypnotizing people, and they would go into the time before their lives. And I was like, wow. So I was relating to a whole different spiritual world that always felt true and real for me personally, but not in a religious sense, right?
Yeah.
And suddenly there's like Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something different about like searching for something and then having something happen to you and then you do research to figure out what that was.
Right. Because I had to catch up to it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have the information in my brain. It was like suddenly I was like speaking Italian, but I didn't, understand what the words meant, and I had to go back and, you know what I mean? It was like I was
Yeah.
fluent
Hmm.
in this other spiritual world. I was completely fluent in it. And then I had to go back and, teach my brain what it was that, like, to even describe it or talk about it. Because my brain was like, what is this stuff that we just went through? It was amazing.
Definitely. And that your near-death experience happened when you were 18, you said?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's a very transformational time anyway.
Oh, God. It was a reset, but it was fantastic. I mean, it was absolute proof that there was something greater than myself that had always been there watching over me. And it was just my journey. It was like, you know what? I set up my life that way. There was no accidents. I still remember, I was like, oh, shoot. I set it up so hard in the beginning. Like those 18 years were like, ah.
Yeah, do you feel like that experience led you to find acting and how that could be an expression of yourself?
It's funny you say that. I think what it actually gave me permission to do was to dive in and explore life as if there were no limits, because that's what I remember. It was like you can do no wrong, that we're all going to hit that endpoint, right? That's the two
Hmm.
things you can, yeah. You're born and you're guaranteed a death. And whatever you want to do in between that, like I remember this passion and excitement. You got to go for it. You got to absolutely go for it. And it's possible. Any of it, all of it is possible. And that's what I remember and took back. And that's probably why I wasn't very discouraged. I wanted to act. I loved acting. I loved the joy and exploration of that. It was a safe way for me to like temper. I came back with so much energy, and I needed to find an arena where I could like express myself, because and wear myself out basically, because I had so much energy for life suddenly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was one thing. It was like, yeah, why not? I'm gonna act, even if everyone around me is like, that is the stupidest idea I've ever heard. You can't make a living that way. Blah 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 blah. Like everything, I would like, I would have like this audition. It'd be a network pilot audition, and and my mom doesn't know anything about like that world the way that you do when you are constantly auditioning and doing that, going on. And so I told her, I made the mistake of like calling her in my excitement, right? I thought, oh, this is such a big deal. I have a network pilot audition. I was like, mom. And she goes, here's her response. She goes, so it's not a booking. And it just like deflated. I just took like, oh my God. I was like, and I learned never to call my parents
Oh,
before I had big things, because they're going to just take it out of me. That's
yes.
anyway, I want.
Yes. So,
Yeah.
so did you have, if since your parents weren't necessarily supportive of that, you had to really believe in yourself to be able to
Oh,
keep
yeah.
that going. Did you have anyone else in your life encouraging you to follow that path?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I always think about like some of my first agents, and it's funny, like people like step in and take over, and they're kind of like they like fill in the spots that were missed by our own
Yeah,
parents, right?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've had agents that I felt loved, like I was their kid and they're my parent and my mom. Like it's been incredible. I'm still so grateful, for like Gina's one of them I can think of. My first agent was so awesome, because she was just she was like on my team. Like she got what I wanted to do and she believed in me. And you got to remember, like I started at a time where there wasn't Asian people didn't really get leads. The only Asian person, it was like Lucy Liu made it, and it was like holy cow. So
Yeah.
I went into this agency and my first agent was like, oh, I don't know, there's not a lot of breakdowns for Asian people, right? And I was like, all right. And she's like, let's just give this a go. We'll see. She just like liked me in the interview. And I go out and I book my first audition and become
Wow.
Taft Hartley into SAG. Yeah. And it was a national. I had no idea how much money actors made, by the way. I had no idea that I got the session fee. I was like, oh, I was still at UCLA at the time. I was like, oh, this is great. I got $500. Yeah. And then the royalties rolled in, and you're like, oh my God. It was like, you could buy a car royalty, and and you hear those were the days where people, you could put a down payment on a house. So it really changed my trajectory in a very fun and creative way, where I was like, I can explore and play this character and do that. And there was freedom. There was so much freedom. And I don't come from that, not in my culture either, right? I'm Chinese, and the Chinese are not known to enter the artistic realms of life as a way to make a living.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with my mom. I mean, my mom was like spectacular. Oh, wait, I should say I booked my second audition. She booked her first. And she grew up on movie sets. She had a cousin who was a Hong Kong movie star. And yeah, and so she got to be on set, and she was and directors would see her and they'd be like, oh my God, you're so pretty, you should act, come in. And my grandfather was like, hell no, because their family was political. And so that was really looked down upon. So she never got to experience that. And she could have been an actress, she was amazing. And she raised me, so I grew up with that. She would coach me to give this Winnie the Pooh monologue in first grade. We'd watch soap operas until dawn. Oh my God, that lady could watch TV. It's Chinese soap operas. It was so, yeah, it's funny, that saying about nothing affects a child more than their parents' unfulfilled dreams.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think you must have experienced that.
Yeah. I didn't know. I mean, it's funny because I I love space, and that's my dad's side, right?
Right.
And then it's I'm an actor. I love acting, and that's my mom's side.
Yes. Do you feel a connection to your Asian culture? Do you feel like any part of that being your voice?
It's funny because I mean, ask me something more specific around that. The way to answer it, I want to talk about that. That's really interesting.
Okay, so for example, when you visit Taiwan, now that you don't live there, but you were as a child, do you feel connected to the land and the soil? Do you feel that an energy to
not at all.
No.
No, let me tell. In fact, I went to China on this backpacking trip because right after my near-death experience, I just started traveling. I didn't even care. I would have no money. I'd be like, I don't care, whatever. Let me go see the world, right? So on one of these trips, I really wanted to get to Tibet, and I had to go through China to get there. And they would look at me, and it was really obvious because I was born in the States. So I just didn't have the mannerisms of a born and bred Chinese person in China would, right? And so they were like, where are you from? Are you Japanese, Korean? And I got ripped off. It was pretty awful. And so that was the one thing that I have to say Taiwan was really different. I was shocked. It was so great because I went back to visit my dad, before the pandemic, and they were really good about they looked at me and they just knew, because there were so many overseas, their kids had been born overseas. They knew what they were looking at when they encountered me. And they were just, I felt very loved and accepted. I was oh, this is so cool. Yeah, no one's gonna try to rip me off. It was oh yeah, they know who, they call it ABC, with American born Chinese. Yeah.
So because so you don't really feel that connection. So
I wouldn't say I don't feel, I love it, but I love it the way that anybody with an interest in that culture would love it. I love The Last Emperor, but it's through the lenses of what Bernardo Bertolucci, right? But to me, that's stunning what he did, right? With the and even I found out this trip back, because part of my family's divorce was that I was just kind of ousted. I didn't get to understand much about my history, and my aunt was telling me this whole side. I didn't even know what my grandma and grandpa's names were, let alone, but I knew there was a lot of fabled history behind these families. And so she started to tell me, I found out I'm like one of the descendants way down, like 39 generations down, something like that, of one of the emperor's prime ministers. And he's this like very cool like figure in China, and a poet and philosopher and strategist, and and
that sounds like you.
yeah, we're
In a
very
lot of
similar.
ways, like very strategic in game playing. And
Yeah, I guess so, right? I guess,
yeah.
and then I'm like, oh, that's where I get it from. It was so cool. It was really cool.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, and that was cool because we found he would use his like gifts for good. He cared about like you could read about all of the philanthropy he did, during his time as prime minister, and I loved that. I loved reading about that, and I felt a kinship to that. So
Yeah, kind of like moving culture forward in a way,
yeah,
which
he cared.
is yeah.
Yeah, like if his name was Fan Zhongyan. And to him, it was important for public servants to serve, like it was important for public servants to actually fulfill their duties for their country and think about what they could do. Like he, transformed, I think, the educational system out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he was famed for saying things like, one should make sure other people's good is taken care of and partake in their own good last. So it was really interesting, like his philosophy around that. It was, it was. That's something that I could really like ascribe to, and that's where I was raised with a lot of like, you got to keep your word, you got to be a good person, you got to be respectable, don't do like shady things. And I won't comment too much on this last administration that just passed, but there was such a sense of like, oh, this is the antithesis of what it means to be in such a
Right.
position of power where you can do so much good for people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you were excited about some of the space things that they were doing, though.
I was that part I was really
Yeah.
excited about.
So,
Yeah.
so what is it about space that you feel so connected to?
Oh, from a very young age, I was just fascinated and curious that there could be an like unbelievable, almost unlimited expanse of something above our heads that we haven't even begun to think about. I mean, and you got to remember, my mom and dad both worked in aerospace. Like, my granduncle was, a rocket design consultant at,
Wow.
in aerospace. Yeah. So I grew up watching rockets. My mom went to work, at an aerospace company, Rockwell, and my dad, was an engineer. And so to me, like it was an obvious next frontier, next step for humanity. It just made so much sense. You had to think about once you leave this planet, the kind of like trivial kind of like things that we do here on Earth, the wars, so to speak, they don't make any more sense. It's like, who really cares? Like, we come from the same planet, and globe. We should look at it as one that
Right.
we can take care of together. And there's so many more worlds to explore. Like, it is absolutely going to happen. We're absolutely going to colonize. First, whether the moon or Mars, our solar system, we're absolutely going to move off planet. And we're witnessing the birth of this new type of society in our generation.
Mm-hmm.
I read the statistic the other day. It was fascinating, and it said since, I don't remember the year right now. It was maybe like 2009, 2000 something, I don't know. Anyways, since that year, it's the first time in history that there's always been a human off planet, like living in the ISS or something. So we're like literally making the leap right now to becoming a spacefaring, civilization.
Goodness, I would say that you're also making a leap in the industry by being in the show that you are doing with On the Spectrum.
Oh yeah.
Just like representing autism and Asian culture together.
Yeah, you don't see Asian people with stuff because Asian people hide that. It's like really, like that was the thing. Like, my mom was like, "Oh my God, my kid is something," and that's like the worst thing that could happen to you, right? As an Asian person in that culture, is like it's kind of like an embarrassment or something, like a point of shame for the family. So there's just kind of like no commenting around, especially like it's kind of like humorous now that you think about it, because Chinese culture is so like they care about like public personas, right? Like how are you perceived in the public eye? Like it was really important to have your social graces, your manners, be somebody that like people like respected. And here comes along this like little Ashby kid, and we're just like brutally we're like honest, we'll be like, that guy's just farted, like we'll just call like like you just say what is. And it was like it's actually really humorous now that I think about it, because my mom would be like, oh my god, my kid is so different. Yeah, I don't think she knew. I think she was trying to protect me. I was bullied a lot, and I think she was just trying to protect me because she knew growing up I wouldn't fare very well. if I didn't hide my peculiarities.
Yeah. When did you learn to embrace that in yourself?
I just, I hit an age where like, I'd made a decision, a conscious choice not to drink anymore, not to do drugs, like not smoking weed, whatever, all of it, right? I don't put any kind of mind altering substances in me. And it was this choice of sobriety that really kind of allowed me to pause the outside world and to start to dive in and look at, why am I the way I am, right? Like, what is going on? And then things would just, I think that's when my like healing and growth process really started, because I was giving myself a chance to feel the emotions and the pains that, like I was running from my whole life. And I just couldn't anymore. I'm like, this is weird. I keep trying to fit in and be somebody that I'm not. I'm never going to be this person. I'm never going to be that. And there just came like an acceptance, right? Of like, well, who am I? Let me really find out what is going on. Who am I really? And why am I the way I am? And I got to learn to love that. I have to learn to unconditionally accept and love myself, because it hasn't changed, and it's not going to change.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Well, it seems to work for you so far.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Do you ever feel like, even after that, do you ever feel that you fall away from your true authentic self? And if you do you have a way to get back on track?
Yeah, it's a lot harder for me to like fall away from that today, just because I have very strong kind of spiritual practices I put in place that just keep me grounded. I check in with like mentors that are important if I'm not sure about, like I have a good strong fellowship and community of people that are all striving to live, their most like happy, joyous, and free life.
Right.
And within, like, that's the one thing about my autism was I was like a sponge. I would just become whoever I was hanging around. I would like take on their mannerisms, the way they speak, like their facial expressions. I would become like them, right? I was a chameleon effect of a girl on the spectrum. It's a very classical trait of that. And so now that I'm in a community of like people who are like striving to be the best person they could be and do good in the world and abide by, unconditional love, it's very different, and it's very healing, and it's very like much closer to home. From, like the story that I told in the beginning of that little kid that was like, why'd you do that? Don't forget who you are.
Yeah.
It's safe for me to be that person in this community. It's very safe.
Yeah. Awesome. So I usually wrap up the conversation with this question. If your inner authentic voice had a billboard, what would it say to the world?
Oh, I like that. I think it would be something along the lines of like, be free, enjoy yourselves, explore and play. There is no wrong path or wrong choice you can make. Don't waste your life. doing nothing.
Don't be so serious.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my God, that was one of the exact phrases that I took back from my near-death experience. I had taken life way too seriously at 18 years old, and it was like, don't take it, it's not that serious, don't worry. I still remember that.
Yeah.
It's great.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining me on this.
Winnie, it was amazing. It was so great to see you again. We missed you over here. I missed you. I'm glad you're well.
Yeah. So if people would like to find you and your work, is there somewhere that we can direct them?
Yeah. I have I have the social medias. I'm on Twitter. I'm starting to really engage there. It's quite enjoyable. And then Instagram, and I have a website and all that. But it'll be easy to track me down.
Yeah, I'll put some links in the show notes so people can just click on it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me this week. If you're listening and you like what you hear, please consider subscribing and rating this podcast, as it really helps get this podcast out to other people who might be interested in hearing it but don't know about it yet. And also, if you'd like to contact me or reach me, you can reach me at unconditioningpodcast@gmail.com or unconditioningpodcast on Instagram. Thank you so much. And until next time, stay tuned in to you.